So we transfer the funds before the audit, right?
You parasites! How could you do this to everyone?
I can't believe you, Blake.
The contract sat on our dining room table like a coiled snake, all 23 pages of legal jargon that basically boiled down to one simple fact. My wife Sierra wanted me to sign away my entire paycheck after our wedding. Every penny. Her parents, Dolores and Frank Whitman, sat across from me with satisfied smirks, as if they'd just solved world hunger instead of drafting what amounted to financial slavery. "It's really quite standard, Ethan," Dolores said, her manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany surface. "Successful families have been using these arrangements for generations." I glanced at Sierra, hoping to see some flicker of embarrassment or doubt in her green eyes. Instead, she nodded enthusiastically, her blonde hair catching the overhead light like a halo. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Standard?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "This thing reads like I'm applying to be your indentured servant, not marrying your daughter." Frank cleared his throat, adjusting his expensive glasses. "The Whitman family has certain expectations, son. Sierra's accustomed to a particular lifestyle. And apparently, I'm accustomed to paying for it." I set the contract down and leaned back in my chair. The dining room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. "Tell me, what exactly do I get out of this arrangement, besides the privilege of working myself to exhaustion for your benefit?" Sierra's face flushed. "Ethan, don't be dramatic. You get me. You get to be part of our family." Lucky me. I picked up the pen they'd provided, a Mont Blanc that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. "You know what? I need a special pen for something this important. This regular pen just won't do justice to such a momentous occasion." I stood up, sliding the contract toward them. "I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." Walking to my truck felt like the longest 30 feet of my life. Every step took me further from the woman I thought I loved, and closer to a truth I'd been avoiding for months. Sierra had been changing, becoming more demanding, more entitled. Her friends had been whispering poison in her ears, and her family had been pulling strings I was only now beginning to see. I climbed into my Ford F-150 and started the engine. Through the dining room window, I could see them all leaning forward, probably discussing how they'd spend my construction project manager salary. Sierra's best friend, Tara, had arrived while I was outside. Perfect timing, as always. She specialized in showing up whenever there was drama to stir. Instead of going to get another pen, I drove straight to First National Bank. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Janet Morrison, the bank manager who'd helped me open my first checking account when I moved to Millbrook 5 years ago. She raised an eyebrow as I explained what I needed. "You want to open a separate account and transfer half your savings?" Janet asked, her fingers poised over her keyboard. "That's right, and I want to set up automatic transfers for half of each paycheck going forward." "Ethan, are you sure about this? It's a big step." "Janet, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I signed the paperwork with their regular ballpoint pen. It worked just fine. By the time I got home, Sierra was pacing the living room like a caged tiger. Tara sat on our couch, her dark eyes gleaming with anticipation. She lived for other people's misery, especially mine. "Where have you been?" Sierra demanded. "We've been waiting for over an hour." "Getting that special pen I mentioned." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Look at this, honey. I opened us a new account. Well, me, a new account. Transferred half our savings into it. Thought you should see what your future husband's financial independence looks like." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I held up the phone so she could see the balance. Her face went white, then red, then back to white again. "You can't do that," she sputtered. "That money is ours." "Actually, it's mine. Earned every penny of it managing construction projects while you've been playing house with your parents' credit cards. I pocketed the phone and headed for the stairs. The contract's still on the table if you want to sign it yourself, though I should mention, I won't be. Ethan, wait! Sierra's voice cracked like a whip, but I kept climbing. From my bedroom window, I watched her parents' Mercedes pull out of our driveway 20 minutes later. Tara's Honda followed close behind. Sierra stayed inside, probably calling everyone she knew to complain about her unreasonable fiancé. I was right. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Linda. Sierra's been calling everyone saying you're having a breakdown, thought you should know. Another text, this one from my work buddy Mick. Heard through the grapevine that Sierra's dad was asking around about your job performance. Might want to watch your back. The third text came from Joe Martinez, who bartended at the Anchor downtown. Joe heard everything that happened in Millbrook, and she had a soft spot for underdogs. Frank Whitman was here earlier, talking to your boss Rick about getting you demoted. Rick told him to mind his own business, but thought you should know. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at these messages. 3 different people, 3 different warnings, all pointing to the same conclusion. The Whitman family wasn't just entitled, they were vindictive, and Sierra was right there with them. My phone rang. Sierra's name appeared on the screen. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said before I could even say hello. "I'm listening. This isn't how I wanted things to go. The contract was just a suggestion. We can work something out." A suggestion that came with a Mont Blanc pen and your parents' lawyer? They're just looking out for us, for our future. No, Sierra, they're looking out for themselves, and apparently so are you. There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear Tara's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. "Tara thinks you're being unreasonable," Sierra finally said. "Tara thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong." I stood up and walked to the window. Mr. Tibbet, our elderly neighbor, was watering his garden. He waved, and I waved back. At least someone in this neighborhood still acted normal. "If you don't sign the contract, I don't know if we can move forward with the wedding," Sierra said, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I'd grown to hate. "Then I guess we have our answer. Ethan..." I hung up. The next morning I woke up to find my truck's windshield covered in what looked like maple syrup. Classy. I grabbed the garden hose and started cleaning it off, wondering if Sierra had done this herself or if she'd enlisted Tara for the job. "Rough night?" Mr. Tibbet called from his yard. "Getting rougher by the minute," I replied, scrubbing sticky residue off my wipers. "Saw some activity around here late last night. 2 women, looked like they were up to no good." I paused in my scrubbing. "You happen to recognize them?" "One looked like your fiancé. The other was that dark-haired friend of hers, the one with the loud laugh." "Thanks, Mr. Tibbet. I appreciate you keeping an eye out." "Any time, son. Been living on this street for 40 years. No trouble when I see it." At work, the atmosphere felt different. People were friendly enough, but there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place. Rick Patterson, my boss, called me into his office around 10. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." "Shoot." "Are you having problems at home?" I leaned back in my chair, studying Rick's weathered face. He'd been in construction for 30 years and had seen every kind of workplace drama imaginable. "Why do you ask?" "Because Sierra's father paid me a visit yesterday. Started asking questions about your job performance, your reliability, whether you might be under stress." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him you're one of the best project managers I've ever worked with, and if he had concerns about your personal life, he should take them up with you directly." Rick leaned forward. "But I'm asking you now, is there something I should know?" I considered my options. Rick deserved honesty, but I also didn't want to drag my workplace into my personal mess. "Sierra and I are having some disagreements about our future. Her family's trying to pressure me into signing a financial agreement that would basically make me their employee instead of their son-in-law." Rick whistled low. That's a new one. What kind of agreement? The kind where I hand over my entire paycheck and ask permission to buy a sandwich. And you told them where they could stick it? In so many words. Rick nodded approvingly. Good man. Frank Whitman's got a reputation around town for thinking his money makes him king. About time someone stood up to him. That afternoon, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Sierra had been working late a lot recently, claiming her HR department was swamped with year-end reviews. But her stories never quite added up. She'd mention working on reports that should have been finished months ago, or staying late for meetings that didn't appear on the company calendar she'd shared with me. I drove to her office building and parked across the street. Sierra's car wasn't in the lot, which was odd since she'd texted me an hour earlier saying she'd be working until at least 7. I called her. Hey, babe, she answered, but her voice sounded strained. What's up? Just checking in. How's the late night going? Oh, same old stuff. Probably won't be home until 9 or 10. In the background, I heard music. Not office music. Something with a heavy bass line that sounded like it was coming from a bar or restaurant. Where are you, Sierra? At the office, like I told you. Listen, I need to get back to work. Sure thing. Love you. You too. The line went quiet, but the lie hung in the air like smoke. I sat in my truck for another hour, watching the office building. Sierra never showed up. That evening, I met Mick at the Anchor for a beer and some perspective. The bar was busy for a Tuesday night, filled with the usual mix of construction workers, office types, and locals who treated Joe's place like a second living room. So let me get this straight, Mick said, nursing his Budweiser. Sierra's family wants you to sign over your paycheck, and when you refused, they tried to get you fired? That's the short version. And now Sierra's lying about working late? Seems like it. Mick shook his head. Brother, you've got yourself a situation. Joe appeared at our end of the bar, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. She was in her 40s, with graying brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. You boys talking about Ethan's woman troubles? She asked. How'd you know? I asked. Because half the town's talking about it. Frank Whitman's been making the rounds telling anyone who'll listen that his future son-in-law is having a nervous breakdown. Nervous breakdown? His words, not mine. Says you're unstable, unreliable, probably not fit to marry his daughter. Mick slammed his beer down. That's complete garbage. I know that, you know that, and most folks around here know that, Joe said. But Frank's got money, and money talks. What else are people saying? I asked. Joe glanced around the bar, then leaned closer. Well, there's been some interesting gossip about Sierra herself. Such as? Such as her being seen around town with Blake Harper. You know Blake, real estate guy, drives that fancy BMW, thinks he's God's gift to womankind. My stomach tightened. Seen how? Let's just say they weren't discussing property values. I stared into my beer, processing this information. Blake Harper was everything I wasn't. Smooth, wealthy, connected. He sold million-dollar homes to rich folks from Boston who wanted weekend places in Maine. If Sierra was spending time with him, it wasn't for career advice. When did you see them? I asked. Last week. They were at Romano's, that fancy Italian place over on Elm Street, holding hands across the table, looking very cozy. You sure it was them? Honey, I've been serving drinks in this town for 15 years. I know everyone, and I know what I saw. Mick patted my shoulder. Sorry, man. That's rough. I finished my beer and stood up. Thanks for the information, Joe. I owe you one. Just take care of yourself, Ethan, and be careful. When people start playing games like this, things can get messy fast. Driving home, I felt like I was seeing my life from the outside for the first time. The woman I'd planned to marry was lying to me, possibly cheating on me, and definitely conspiring with her family to control me. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I pulled into my driveway, and sat in the darkness for a few minutes, thinking. Sierra's car was there, which meant she'd beaten me home despite supposedly working until 10. Another lie to add to the growing pile. Inside, I found her curled up on the couch, watching television in her pajamas. "Hey," she said without looking up. "How was your evening?" "Good. Grabbed a beer with Mick. How was work?" "Exhausting. Glad to be home." I studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt or deception. She seemed perfectly relaxed, as if lying to me was the most natural thing in the world. "I might need to work late again tomorrow," she added. "Big project coming due." "Of course you do." Something in my tone must have caught her attention, because she finally looked at me. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Sierra. Just tired." I headed upstairs, leaving her with the television and her lies. In our bedroom, I opened my laptop and started doing some research of my own. If Sierra wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. 3 days later, Millbrook's annual summer bash was in full swing. The town common was packed with families, food trucks, and a local band that was enthusiastically butchering classic rock songs. Sierra had insisted we go together, probably to maintain appearances after our recent tensions. I was buying funnel cake when I spotted them. Sierra and Blake Harper stood near the ring toss booth, their heads close together in conversation. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm in a way that was definitely not professional. Blake looked exactly like what he was, a guy who spent more on his haircut than I spent on groceries. Well, well, I muttered, pulling out my phone to snap a few discreet photos. Looks like Sierra's working late again. I approached them slowly, weaving through the crowd. Sierra saw me first, her face cycling through surprise, guilt, and finally settling on defiance. "Ethan," she called out too brightly. "There you are. I was just talking to Blake about some properties." "Properties," I repeated, looking Blake up and down. "On a Saturday night, at a town festival. How dedicated of you both." Blake extended his hand with practiced charm. "Ethan, right. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, squeezing just a little harder than necessary. "All good things, I hope." Of course, Sierra's always talking about her hard-working fiancé. "Fiancé, right." I turned to Sierra. "Funny thing, I could have sworn you said you were working late tonight. Something about quarterly reports?" Sierra's smile faltered. "I finished early. Ran into Blake here by coincidence." Coincidence. One of my favorite words. I looked around at the crowd, noting how many people were watching our little reunion. Small towns loved their drama. "Blake, what kind of properties were you discussing? Residential, commercial, or maybe something more personal?" Blake's confident expression wavered slightly. "Just general market trends. Sierra mentioned she might be interested in upgrading soon." "Upgrading?" I nodded thoughtfully. "That's interesting, considering we haven't discussed any plans to move. But then again, Sierra's been full of surprises lately." A small crowd was starting to gather, drawn by the tension in our voices. I recognized several faces, neighbors, co-workers, people who'd known me for years. Their expressions ranged from curious to sympathetic. "Ethan," Sierra hissed, "you're making a scene." "Am I? I thought I was just having a friendly conversation with my fiancée and her business associate." Blake stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Look, buddy, I don't know what your problem is, but—" "My problem?" I laughed, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "My problem is that my fiancée has been lying to me about working late while she's actually out having cozy dinners with smooth-talking real estate guys. But hey, maybe that's just how business is done these days." "You don't know what you're talking about," Blake said, but his face was turning red. "Don't I? Romano's restaurant last Tuesday night, holding hands across the table. Very professional." Sierra gasped. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been paying attention. There's a difference." The crowd was definitely listening now. I could see phones coming out, people recording what was shaping up to be the most entertaining thing to happen at the summer bash in years. Blake made the mistake of trying to grab my arm. "Why don't you calm down and—" I stepped back, causing him to stumble forward. At the same moment, someone bumped into me from behind, and my funnel cake went flying, landing squarely on Blake's pristine white polo shirt. "Oops," I said, not bothering to hide my smile. "Sorry about that, Blake. Hope it doesn't stain." The crowd erupted in laughter. Blake looked down at his shirt in horror, powdered sugar and grease spreading across the expensive fabric. "You did that on purpose," he sputtered. "Did what? I was just standing here having a conversation about business practices and coincidences." Sierra grabbed Blake's arm, trying to lead him away, but the damage was done. Half the town had just watched her boyfriend, because that's obviously what he was, get humiliated by her fiancé. "This isn't over," Blake said, pointing at me. "You're right," I replied. "It's just getting started." As they hurried away, I heard the whispers starting around me. "Did you see how guilty she looked?" Always knew there was something off about that Sierra. "Good for Ethan. About time someone stood up to these entitled types." Mick appeared at my side, grinning broadly. "That was beautiful, man. Absolutely beautiful." "Just getting warmed up," I said, watching Sierra and Blake disappear into the crowd. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck vandalized again. This time, someone had keyed "loser" into the passenger side door and slashed 2 of my tires. Classy as always. Mr. Tibbet was in his garden again, and he wandered over as I surveyed the damage. "Saw who did it," he said without preamble. "Oh?" "Same 2 women as before. Around 3 in the morning. Got it all on my security camera if you need proof." I looked at him with new respect. "You have security cameras?" "Son, I'm 82 years old and I live alone. Of course I have security cameras. Want to see the footage?" 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Mr. Tibbet's living room, watching grainy but clear video of Sierra and Tara vandalizing my truck. They'd been thorough, and stupid enough to do it under a streetlight. "Mind if I get a copy of this?" I asked. "Already burned you a DVD. Figured you might need it." I pocketed the disc, feeling like the universe was finally starting to balance the scales. "Mr. Tibbet, you're a lifesaver. Just looking out for a good neighbor. That girl's no good for you, son. Never was." That afternoon, Linda called. My sister had always been protective of me, and she'd never particularly liked Sierra. "I heard about last night," she said. "The whole town's talking about it. Good news travels fast. Ethan, what are you planning to do?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've got that tone in your voice. The same one you had when Tommy Morrison kept bullying you in high school." I smiled, remembering. Tommy had spent months making my life miserable until I'd finally had enough. It had taken careful planning and perfect timing, but I'd eventually turned his own friends against him by exposing what a coward he really was. "I'm just going to let the truth come out," I said. "The truth has a way of being messy. So do lies." That evening, Sierra came home with red eyes and a defiant expression. "We need to talk," she announced. "I'm listening." "What you did last night was humiliating. Blake is just a friend, and you made it seem like something sordid." "Blake is your boyfriend, Sierra. Let's at least be honest about that." "He's not my—" She stopped herself, realizing the trap. "Not your what? Not your boyfriend? Not your lover? Not the guy you've been sneaking around with while lying to me about working late?" She sat down heavily on the couch. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me. Blake and we have a connection, an understanding. An understanding. He gets me in ways that you don't. He understands my ambitions, my goals." "Your goal of spending my paycheck? This isn't about money." "Everything with your family is about money, Sierra. The contract, your father trying to get me fired, your mother's constant comments about my truck and my clothes and my job. It's all about money and status and control. She was crying now, but they looked like angry tears rather than sad ones. I thought you loved me, she said. I thought I did too, but I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. The real Sierra is sitting right here, and she's a stranger. I headed for the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Sierra? Next time you want to vandalize my truck, you might want to check if the neighbors have security cameras. Her face went white. Sweet dreams, I said, and went to bed. The next few days passed in a strange kind of calm. Sierra barely spoke to me, spending most of her time on the phone with Tara or locked in the spare bedroom she'd claimed as her office. I used the time to do research and make plans. Blake Harper, it turned out, was not as successful as he pretended to be. A little digging revealed that his real estate business was struggling. He was behind on his BMW payments, and his luxury condo was actually a rental. The man was living on credit and charm, neither of which would last forever. More interesting was what I learned about Sierra's job. Her HR department had been downsizing for months, and several people had been let go. Sierra's position was far from secure, especially if her recent performance had been affected by her extracurricular activities. I also discovered that Tara's husband had filed for divorce 6 months ago, citing adultery. She was in the middle of a nasty custody battle and apparently taking her frustrations out by encouraging Sierra's bad decisions. Misery loves company, as they say. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to take action. My first stop was Sierra's office. I'd visited her there many times over the years, and the security guard knew me well enough to wave me through. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and walked into the HR department like I belonged there. "Ethan," called Janet Walsh, Sierra's supervisor. "What brings you here?" "Looking for Sierra, actually. She left some papers at home that she needed for a meeting." Janet looked confused. "Sierra's not here today. She called in sick this morning." "Sick?" I checked my phone. "That's weird. She texted me an hour ago saying she was in back-to-back meetings all day. Must be some kind of miscommunication. She's been taking a lot of sick days lately, actually. Everything okay at home?" "As far as I know. Thanks, Janet. I'll catch up with her later." I left the building with a smile. Sierra was getting sloppy, and sloppy people made mistakes. My next stop was Blake's office. Harper Realty occupied a small suite in a converted Victorian house on Main Street. The receptionist, a young woman who looked barely out of high school, greeted me with a practiced smile. "I'm here to see Blake," I said. "It's about a property." "Do you have an appointment?" "He told me to stop by any time. Ethan Rowley." She buzzed him, and a moment later, Blake appeared, looking less polished than he had at the festival. His shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Ethan, this is unexpected." "I was in the neighborhood. Thought we should have a proper conversation." He glanced around nervously, probably wondering if I was going to cause another scene. "Sure. Come on back." His office was impressive in a trying too hard way. Leather furniture, expensive-looking art, and a desk that was bigger than my kitchen table. But I noticed the stack of overdue notices partially hidden under some files, and the fact that his computer was displaying a past-due invoice. "What can I do for you?" Blake asked, settling behind his desk like it was a fortress. "I want to make you an offer." "An offer?" "Stay away from my fiancée, and I won't share some interesting information I've discovered about your business practices." Blake's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of him and Sierra at Romano's. "This says otherwise." "That doesn't prove anything." "Maybe not legally, but in a small town like this, appearances matter, especially for someone whose business depends on trust and reputation." I leaned forward. "I also know about your financial problems. The late payments, the maxed-out credit cards, the fact that your fancy condo is actually a rental. How do you think your clients would feel knowing their successful real estate agent is one missed payment away from bankruptcy?" Blake stood up abruptly. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away from Sierra, and your secrets stay secret. Keep pursuing her, and I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. You can't do that. Watch me. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Blake? If you're thinking about retaliating somehow, you should know that I've already shared all this information with several trusted friends, just in case something unfortunate happens to me. That evening, I met Mick at the Anchor to celebrate phase 1 of my plan. You actually went to his office? Mick asked, shaking his head in admiration. Had to establish the rules of engagement. Joe appeared with fresh beers. Heard through the grapevine that Blake Harper's been asking around about you, trying to find dirt. Let him look. My life's an open book. That's what I told him. Said you're about the most honest, hard-working guy in town. Don't think that's what he wanted to hear. Mick raised his beer. To fighting back. To fighting smart, I corrected. The next morning brought an interesting development. Sierra was gone when I woke up, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to think. Back later. We need to talk. I was drinking coffee and reading the note for the 3rd time when my phone rang. It was Rick, my boss. Ethan, we need to meet. Can you come in early today? Sure. Everything okay? Just come in. We'll talk then. An hour later, I was sitting in Rick's office wondering if Frank Whitman had made another play to get me fired. I got an interesting call yesterday, Rick began. From Blake Harper. My stomach tightened. Oh? He wanted to know about your work schedule, whether you'd been acting strange lately, if there were any performance issues. What did you tell him? I told him it was none of his business and hung up. But Ethan, what the heck is going on? Why is some real estate guy asking about my project manager? I explained the situation, the contract, the affair, the escalating conflict. Rick listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker by the minute. So let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your fiancé's family tried to control you financially, and when that didn't work, they started going after your job and reputation? That's about the size of it. Rick stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the construction site where our current project was taking shape. You know what I think, Ethan? What's that? I think you're handling this exactly right. Frank Whitman's been throwing his weight around this town for too long, and his daughter sounds like a chip off the old block. He turned back to me. You've got my full support, and if Blake Harper calls here again, I'll tell him exactly what I think of people who stick their noses where they don't belong. Thanks, Rick. That means a lot. Just don't do anything stupid. Men in your situation sometimes make bad choices. I'm not planning to do anything illegal or violent, but I'm not going to roll over and let them walk all over me either. Good man. Now get out of here and go manage some projects. That afternoon, I got a text from Linda. Sierra's been calling Mom, crying about how you've changed. Thought you should know. I called my sister back. What exactly is she telling Mom? That you've become paranoid and controlling, that you're following her around and making threats. Threats? Her word, not mine. Mom's worried about you. I should call her. Already handled it. Told her Sierra's been cheating on you, and now she's trying to play victim. Mom was not pleased. I smiled. Linda had always been my protector, even when we were kids. Thanks, sis. Just be careful, Ethan. Desperate people do desperate things. That evening, Sierra returned home looking defeated. She found me in the garage, organizing my tools, a therapeutic activity that helped me think. We need to end this, she said without preamble. End what? This whole mess. The fighting, the accusations, the games. I set down my wrench and looked at her. I agree. When's the wedding off? I didn't say anything about calling off the wedding. Then what are you suggesting? We go back to how things were, before the contract, before all this craziness. Before I found out who you really are? I made some mistakes, okay? But we can work through this. What about Blake? She hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. Blake is complicated. Complicated how? I care about him, but I care about you too. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You want to keep us both. I want to figure out what I really want without all this pressure and drama. Here's what's going to happen, Sierra. You're going to choose him or me. Tonight. Right now. That's not fair. Fair? You've been lying to me for weeks, cheating on me, vandalizing my truck, and conspiring with your family to control my life. And you want to talk about fair? She started crying again, but this time the tears looked real. I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know who I am anymore. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You're someone who needs to make a choice, I said, because I'm done being anyone's backup plan. She wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been respect. And if I choose Blake? Then you pack your things and leave. Tonight. And if I choose you? Then Blake disappears from your life forever. You apologize to everyone you've lied to, and we start over. Clean slate, but with new rules. She nodded slowly. I need some time to think. You have until midnight. She went inside, and I went back to organizing my tools. Either way, my life was about to change dramatically. At 11:47 p.m., Sierra appeared in the garage doorway with 2 suitcases. I'm sorry, Ethan, I really am. But you're choosing him. I'm choosing myself, for the first time in my life. I nodded, feeling oddly relieved. Good luck, Sierra. She hesitated at the door. What happens now? Now you live with your choices, and I live with mine. After she left, I sat in my garage until dawn, thinking about second chances and new beginnings. The hardest part was over, or so I thought. 3 weeks later, I thought the worst was behind me. Sierra had moved in with Blake, and the town gossip mill had moved on to other scandals. I was adjusting to living alone, actually enjoying the peace and quiet. Then Linda called with news that changed everything. Ethan, you need to know something. Sierra and Blake have been meeting with a lawyer. Divorce lawyer? No, criminal lawyer. They're planning to accuse you of harassment and threatening behavior. My coffee mug hit the kitchen floor, shattering into pieces. What? Tara's been helping them build a case? They have recordings of phone calls, photos of the confrontation at the festival, witness statements about your erratic behavior. Those recordings are fake, and the confrontation was public. Everyone saw what really happened. I know that, and you know that. But they're going to try to paint you as an unstable ex-fiancé who's been stalking Sierra. Why would they do this? Because Blake's business is failing, and he thinks Sierra has money. But he's found out about your separate bank account and the fact that Sierra doesn't actually have access to your assets. They need you discredited so they can challenge the financial arrangements in court. I sank into a chair, processing this information. How do you know all this? Because Tara's ex-husband is dating my friend Rebecca. He overheard Tara bragging about the plan and thought you should know. When are they filing charges? Tomorrow morning. I had less than 24 hours to turn this around. Time to stop playing defense and go on the attack. My first call was to Joe at the Anchor. I need a favor, and it's important. Name it. Can you get Tara to come to the bar tonight? Tell her you have gossip about me or something. Make it sound juicy. What are you planning? Insurance? My second call was to Mick. Remember how you helped me set up that tracking app on Sierra's phone? Yeah, but she's not your problem anymore. She is, if she's trying to have me arrested on false charges. Can you help me with something similar for Tara? What did you have in mind? I explained my plan. Mick was quiet for a long moment. That's either brilliant or completely insane, he said finally. Probably both. You in? Wouldn't miss it. That evening, I sat in my truck across from the anchor, watching through the window as Joe worked her magic. Tara arrived at 8, dressed to impress and clearly expecting to be the center of attention. Mick was inside, posing as a random customer with excellent hearing and a digital recorder. The plan was simple: get Tara talking about the false harassment charges, record her admitting the evidence was fabricated, and use that recording to clear my name. What I didn't expect was for Blake to show up 20 minutes later. He walked into the bar like he owned it, scanning the room until he spotted Tara. They sat together in a corner booth, their heads close together in conversation. Perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from Mick. "You need to hear this. They're not just planning to frame you. They're planning to clean out Sierra's accounts and disappear together." I stared at the message, feeling pieces click into place. Blake wasn't in love with Sierra. He was using her to get to her family's money. And Tara was helping him because she thought she'd get a cut. Another text from Mick. "Tara just admitted the harassment evidence is fake. Also, Blake's been promising to take her with him when he leaves town." Poor Sierra. She thought she'd found true love, but she'd actually found two con artists who were planning to betray her. My phone rang. It was Sierra. "Ethan, I need help." "What's wrong?" "Blake's acting strange. He keeps asking about my family's money, and he's been meeting with lawyers without telling me why." "Where are you?" "At his condo. But something's not right. I found plane tickets in his desk, 2 tickets to Florida, but one of them has Tara's name on it. Sierra, listen to me carefully. Pack whatever you can carry and leave, right now." "What? Why?" "Because Blake and Tara are planning to frame me for harassment, steal whatever money they can from you, and disappear together. You're not his girlfriend. You're his mark." There was a long silence. "I don't understand," she said finally. "I'm at the anchor right now watching them plan your betrayal. My friend is recording the whole conversation. You're lying. You're just trying to get back at me." "Sierra, when have I ever lied to you? Even when you were lying to me, even when you were cheating on me, did I ever lie to you?" Another silence. "No," she admitted. "Then trust me now. Get out of there and meet me at my house. We'll figure this out together." "Ethan, The line went quiet. Not hung up, just quiet, like the phone had been taken away from her. I was out of my truck and running toward the bar before I'd fully processed what that meant. Blake and Tara were inside, but Sierra was at the condo, and something had gone wrong. I burst through the bar's front door, causing heads to turn throughout the room. Blake and Tara looked up from their booth, their faces cycling through surprise, guilt, and fear. "Where is she?" I demanded. "Where's who?" Blake asked, but his voice was shaky. "Sierra. She was just on the phone with me, and now she's not. What did you do?" Tara started to stand, but Mick appeared beside their booth, blocking her exit. "Sit down," he said quietly. "We're all going to have a nice conversation." Joe had moved to the front door and flipped the closed sign. The other customers, sensing drama, had either left or moved to the bar to watch the show. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Blake said, trying to sound authoritative, "but this is harassment. We have lawyers." "You have con games," I interrupted, "and recordings of you planning to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." Mick held up his phone. "Want to hear yourselves plotting to fabricate evidence? It's really quite interesting." Blake's face went white. Tara looked like she was going to be sick. "Now," I continued, "you're going to call whoever you sent to Blake's condo, and you're going to tell them to let Sierra go. Then you're going to explain to everyone in this bar exactly what you've been planning." "We haven't done anything wrong," Tara said, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Conspiracy to file false police reports, fraud, extortion. Should I keep going?" My phone rang. Sierra's number. "Ethan?" Her voice was scared, but okay. "Are you hurt?" "No, but there are 2 men here who won't let me leave. They say Blake sent them." I looked at Blake, who was staring at the table like it might swallow him. Tell them Blake changed his mind. Tell them to leave, and then you leave too. Come to the anchor. Okay. I hung up and looked around the bar. Everyone was watching. Joe, Mick, the remaining customers, even old Pete, who usually passed out in the corner booth by 9. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. Blake and Tara are going to confess to their little scheme. They're going to return any money they've taken from Sierra, and they're going to leave town. Tonight. You can't make us do anything, Blake said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Actually, I can. Because the alternative is that I play Mick's recording for the police, along with the evidence I have of your financial fraud and Tara's perjury in her divorce case. Tara gasped. How do you know about that? Small towns, Tara. Everyone knows everything eventually. The bar's front door opened, and Sierra walked in. She looked around the room, taking in the tense scene before walking over to stand beside me. They had 2 guys waiting in Blake's apartment, she said. Big guys. They were going to take me somewhere until Blake's business was finished. Blake stood up abruptly. This is insane. Sierra, tell them you're fine. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Sierra looked at him for a long moment. The plane tickets to Florida. Were you really going to take me with you? Of course I was. Then why is Tara's name on the second ticket? Blake opened his mouth, closed it, then sat back down. I want to hear the recording, Sierra said. Mick played it back. 20 minutes of Blake and Tara planning to frame me, steal Sierra's money, and disappear together. Sierra's face grew paler with each revelation. When it finished, she turned to Blake. You never loved me. Sierra, I can explain. You saw me as a way to get money, and when you realized I didn't have as much as you thought, you decided to take what you could and run. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. She turned to me. I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything. We'll talk later. Right now we need to deal with them. Joe had been listening from behind the bar, and now she spoke up. Blake Harper, your family's been coming to this bar for 3 generations. Your grandfather would be ashamed. My grandfather's gone, Blake muttered. But his reputation isn't, and after tonight, neither is yours. I pulled out my phone and showed Blake a photo of him and Tara entering the bar together. I've been documenting everything. Your conspiracy, your fraud, your plans to leave town. It's all recorded and backed up in multiple locations. What do you want? He asked finally. I want you gone, both of you, tonight, and I want a written confession about the false harassment charges. And if we don't? Then tomorrow morning, the police get everything. The recordings, the evidence of fraud, the witness statements. You'll be arrested before noon. Blake looked at Tara, who was crying now. We don't have a choice. No, I agreed. You don't. It took another hour to work out the details. Blake and Tara wrote out confessions, returned the money they'd stolen from Sierra, and agreed to leave Maine immediately. The bar's customers served as witnesses, and Joe provided paper and pens. As they prepared to leave, Blake turned to me one last time. You know this isn't over, right? We could come back. You could try. But I've got friends in this town, and you've got enemies. Which one of us do you think would win that fight? He didn't answer. After they left, the bar slowly returned to normal. Sierra and I sat in the corner booth they'd vacated, not talking, just processing everything that had happened. I was such an idiot, she said finally. You fell for a con man. It happens to smart people all the time. I cheated on you. I lied to you. I tried to control you. Yes, you did. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked tired, scared, and older somehow, but she also looked honest in a way she hadn't for a long time. I don't know, Sierra. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, it never looks quite the same again. But it can still work? Maybe, if both people are willing to be very careful with the pieces. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want to try, if you're willing. I thought about everything that had happened. The contract, the lies, the betrayal, the revenge. All of it had led to this moment, this choice. We'd have to start over completely, I said. New rules, new boundaries, new everything. I understand. And it would take time. A lot of time. I have time. I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt familiar and foreign at the same time. Then let's see what happens. Outside, Blake's BMW pulled out of the parking lot for the last time, carrying two people who'd learned that in small towns, the underdog sometimes has the sharpest teeth. Inside the Anchor, Sierra and I began the long process of figuring out if love could survive betrayal, if trust could be rebuilt from scratch, and if second chances were worth the risk. The answer, I thought, would be worth finding out.